When a public official can't answer the simplest yes or no question, something is wrong, because people who have nothing to hide don't need to dodge, stall, or attack the person asking. And that's exactly what made this hearing so explosive. It wasn't just the tension. It wasn't just the evasions. It was the moment one lawmaker pressed for straight answers, and the person sitting in the witness chair suddenly couldn't give any. What unfolded next wasn't politics. It was a rare, unfiltered look at how power behaves when accountability gets too close.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Ranking Member. Thank you, Ranking Member. Thank you, and welcome, Attorney General Bondi. I just wonder, sincerely wonder, do you hear how hollow your last words sound in light of the pardon of all of the January 6th people? Day one of this administration. I believe you're sincere. You want to protect law enforcement, but your principal, the president, pardoned every single one on January 6th. It rings hollow when you say these words, that if you spit on a police officer, we're going to go after you. Talk to my friends who are Capitol Police officers who were here, 5 of whom are no longer here. They are dead. And this administration, and I guess I want to ask you, did you have any advice for the president when he came forward with the blanket pardon on January 20th? What advice did you offer the president?
I am never going to talk about conversations, advice
Were you asked
in any
for,
way.
Were you asked
I'm
for
never
advice?
going to talk about discussions I've had
Because
or have not had.
You'll
But
remember.
I can answer with the President of the United
Yes or no?
States.
Did you give him any advice? Yes or no?
I am not going to discuss any conversations
That's a
that
no.
I have had with it.
And
you just put
your
words in
own
my
word,
mouth. I am not going to
No,
discuss.
I'm going to reveal your own words.
I am
Just a
not
moment.
going to
Please stop.
discuss
Please stop.
conversations
This is my
that
time.
I've had with the President of the United States.
Attorney
You asked
General,
me a question.
I would like to reclaim
and
the
you
last
asked
20
me to
seconds.
answer.
I have asked to reclaim my time. Please put 20 seconds back on the clock.
You have an extra 30.
If the general,
She answered and then answered it again and answered it again with a non-answer. I ask for your consideration
if the
of
general
putting time
lady
on.
will let the witness answer the questions, we will.
She
proceed.
answered it by saying no. Okay. The 3 hallmarks of this administration are incompetence, corruption, and cruelty. I'm going to focus today on corruption. And in my mind, there are 2 types of corruption: personal, and then the other I'm going to call public, governmental. Attorney General, have you ever been registered as an agent of a foreign principal under the Foreign Agents Registration Act?
I assume you're talking about when I represented the country of Qatar for a very short time.
The answer is yes. No,
hold
excuse
on.
me.
No.
No.
For anti-human trafficking for the World Cup. Anti-human trafficking
Yes or
for the
no?
World Cup.
Attorney
you can't
General,
put words in my mouth.
No.
You want to talk about incompetence? You're the one that
Excuse
said Joe Biden on PBS was competent. You had to retract those words.
Mr.
So don't
Chairman,
talk to me. Don't insult me publicly.
this is so discourteous. This is so outside the committee's guidelines. Taking a personal shot at me while swiping at Biden? Very strange and very unprofessional of you. The answer is yes or no, and the answer is yes. You were registered as a lobbyist for Qatar. Is that correct? Yes. Never mind. Don't answer. Did you disclose that when you went before for the Senate for confirmation? Yes or no? No, it was not in your documents. The answer is no. President Trump.
This was discussed at my confirmation hearings in detail.
It was discussed, but you failed to bring up the conflict that you had. President Trump recently announced he'd accept that $400 million Qatar airplane because it was just prettier than the one he was flying around in. Is it true that you gave advice that this was legally permissible? Yes or no?
I will not discuss any advice that my Office of Legal Counsel gives to the President of the United States on any matter.
When you spoke before the Senate, you said you would ask for ethical advice. Did you recuse yourself from that issue?
And talking about unprofessional, you say the President wanted a jet because it's pretty?
Excuse
Come
me.
on, this is a Senate, this is
He
a
said it
congressional
himself.
hearing.
He said it himself.
Representative Madeleine Dean didn't walk into this hearing looking for drama. She walked in expecting honesty. She started by pointing out something that should have been simple. You can't claim to defend law enforcement while the administration you represent issued blanket pardons for the people involved in January 6th. To officers who lived through that day, that contradiction wasn't symbolic, it was personal. Dean even mentioned the officers she knows who stood in those hallways, the trauma they still carry, and the 5 who are no longer alive. That's the emotional core she laid on the table. And all Bondi had to do was acknowledge the contradiction. But she didn't. She dodged. She pivoted. She tried to talk around it without ever hitting the point directly. But Dean wasn't letting that slide. So she moved to the question everyone wanted answered. Did Bondi advise the president before that blanket pardon was issued? It should have been a yes or no. Instead, Bondi sank into the standard political shield. She would not discuss any conversations with the president. She repeated that over and over, until her refusal became louder than any actual answer could have been. Dean made it clear. Dodging a simple question only raises more questions. And that's when Bondi made her first big mistake. Instead of answering, she took a personal swipe at Dean, bringing up comments she made on an entirely unrelated topic. It was a classic move used when someone wants to redirect the heat, turn the spotlight onto the person asking. But the problem for Bondi was that Dean didn't take the bait. She stayed calm, stayed focused, and brought the conversation right back to the issue at hand: corruption. That's when the hearing shifted into dangerous territory for Bondi. Dean asked whether she had ever registered as a foreign agent under the Foreign Agents Registration Act. Bondi tried to soften the answer, reframing it as anti-human trafficking work connected to the World Cup. But Dean cut through that instantly. You were registered as a lobbyist for Qatar. Yes or no? And the answer was yes. That's where the real conflict began to show. Bondi had that connection. She had worked as a foreign lobbyist. And she failed to disclose it during her Senate confirmation. That's not small. Undisclosed foreign ties aren't something that just slips someone's mind. These are the kinds of conflicts that raise real questions about whose interests are being protected. Especially when the same administration later considered accepting a $400 million jet from the same foreign government. Rumors at the time even suggested there were internal conversations about whether this was legally permissible. Reports circulated claiming Bondi herself was involved in providing the legal interpretation for that decision. But when Dean asked whether she advised on that issue, Bondi shut down again. Another simple yes or no question. And another refusal. Dean pressed further, asking whether Bondi had recused herself from issues involving Qatar after working as their lobbyist. Instead of answering, Bondi went back to deflection. She complained about how the question was framed. She said the description was unfair. She tried to pivot back to comments Dean made elsewhere. Anything to avoid going on the record with something that could confirm a conflict of interest. But Dean wasn't letting the moment die. She reclaimed her time, literally asking for seconds to be put back on the clock because Bondi had wasted them with non-answers. And what happened next said everything. Another member of the committee noted that Bondi had answered only by refusing to answer. That's how obvious it had become. The more Dean pushed, the clearer the pattern was: silence, deflection, and irritation instead of transparency. Then Dean laid out the heart of her argument. She said the administration had 3 defining traits: incompetence, corruption, and cruelty. And she wanted to focus on corruption. Not just the personal kind like undisclosed foreign lobbying, but the public institutional kind. The type that happens when officials placed in powerful positions evade accountability, hide conflicts, and refuse to give clear answers about their decision-making. It's the type of corruption the public rarely sees in full view, because most of it takes place behind closed doors. But here it was happening out loud, recorded on camera, exposed to the country. Dean reminded everyone that transparency isn't optional. When someone takes a powerful public position, their past relationships matter. Their foreign ties matter. Their legal advice matters. And their responsibility to be honest under questioning isn't a courtesy. It's part of the job. Bondi's refusal to acknowledge that responsibility wasn't just evasive. It was revealing. It signaled that there were answers she didn't want to give, and discussions she didn't want tied to her name. That's where this moment becomes bigger than 2 people arguing in a committee room. When officials dodge basic questions, that silence becomes its own form of admission. When they throw personal shots instead of providing clarity, it shows where their priorities really are. When they reframe, redirect, and refuse, it signals there's something behind the curtain they don't want exposed. That's why Dean kept pressing, not out of hostility, but because the public deserves answers that powerful people would prefer stay hidden. And this isn't just about foreign lobbying or ethics disclosures. It's about something deeper. How public trust collapses when leaders are allowed to choose when they're transparent and when they're silent. A government only works when people can believe the officials inside it are honest. When that honesty becomes optional, everything else weakens. Dean made that point without ever raising her voice. She didn't need theatrics. She didn't need dramatic lines. She just needed the truth. Bondi's responses, or lack of them, did the rest on their own. Every non-answer told its own story. Every deflection raised another question. Every refusal pushed the audience closer to the conclusion Dean was trying to highlight. Accountability only matters when it's applied evenly, no matter who's in power. And that's the moment viewers often miss. These hearings aren't just about politics. They're about watching power in real time. You see who's willing to be honest, who's willing to stand behind their choices, who's willing to defend their actions, and who can't bring themselves to speak when the questions get too close to something uncomfortable. In this confrontation, the contrast couldn't have been sharper. Dean remained composed, direct, and focused on the facts. Bondi grew defensive, irritated, and evasive. Dean tried to create clarity. Bondi tried to create confusion. Dean pushed for truth. Bondi tried to push past the questions. And beyond the room, people noticed. Commentators pointed out how quickly the conversation turned from policy to defensiveness. Legal analysts noted that Bondi's evasions didn't actually protect her. Often, they only drew more attention to the areas she avoided. Online, rumors circulated about why she refused to answer. Some suggested she didn't want to reveal influences behind the scenes. Others speculated that disclosing details about foreign contacts could raise additional scrutiny. These were just claims, not confirmed facts, but the speculation alone was proof of how the silence fueled doubt. That's the power of these moments. When answers aren't given, the public tries to fill in the blanks. And the more blanks there are, the more the story shifts from clarity to suspicion. Dean wasn't creating that suspicion. Bondi's refusals were. By the end of the hearing, the tension wasn't just between two people. It was between transparency and avoidance, between accountability and evasion, between someone demanding answers and someone afraid to give them. And that's the real takeaway. When elected or appointed officials hold public power, the public deserves honesty. They deserve to know about foreign ties. They deserve to know about potential conflicts. They deserve to know whether decisions were made independently or influenced by outside interests. These aren't optional details. They're the foundation of ethical government. What this hearing exposed wasn't just one disagreement. It was the larger pattern within an administration where secrecy was too often the default. And that's why confrontations like this matter. They remind us that accountability only exists when someone is willing to demand it, and someone else is expected to provide it. If you want leaders who don't run from simple questions, who don't dodge the truth, and who don't hide their conflicts behind silence, then moments like this are exactly why we need to keep watching, keep paying attention, and keep speaking up. If you want more breakdowns like this, deep dives into hearings, political clashes, and the stories behind the moments that shape our country, make sure you subscribe, hit the like button, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video.